okay, yeah, we know the majority of women right now are giving birth in hospitals. And in order for us to be with women, you know what I mean? Some of us have to be there, but never get comfortable thinking that's your home. Never get comfortable thinking that's where you belong and that's where the majority of women belong. It happens to be what's going on right now, but we should always be making steps to move back to the way things were in the sense of community, family, connection, togetherness, relationship, like real relationship, that is the foundation. Those are the fundamentals. And that's where, you know what I mean? We have to work our way. We have to work out if we want to survive.
Welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. This week, Augustine is joined by guest CNM Ebony Simpson. The title of this episode says it all. Midwifery care needs to be the solution. In this episode, Augustine and Ebony lead us through a beautiful conversation on why and how midwifery care is so important. Ebony shares her own personal experience of how having her daughter at the Brooklyn Birthing Center led her to this career in midwifery. She shares recommendations for new CNMs, specifically why she believes every CNM should have some experience in the community-based setting before starting their practice in the hospital. Ebony shares what she has seen and experienced since moving into a hospital setting, and some of her goals to help shift the culture in the general population around birth. As I already said, this is a beautiful conversation full of incredible aha moments. So let's dive in.
All right. So my name is Ebony Monique Simpson. I am a certified nurse midwife living in the DC metro region, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I have one baby girl who I gave birth to at a birthing center called Brooklyn Birthing Center.
We love Brooklyn Birthing Center.
Yeah, that experience pretty much gave me the firm nudge to go in the direction of midwifery.
Wow.
Yeah. Many moons ago, I had the opportunity. I didn't know really much about midwives or birthing centers or birth. I was 22 years old. I was a junior at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And, met a man, became pregnant, decided to go back home. And a good friend of mine whose sister had attempted to have a birth at the Brooklyn Birthing Center, but was transferred, told me about it. And, I just recall that first day, I think it was like the D train, hopping off of the D train in Dyker Heights. And it was just like this townhome, right? Two examination rooms, 2 birthing rooms that look like bedrooms. And it seemed to be, okay. So I just continued with them and had a very lovely birth experience. And after that experience, people would ask me, how was it? Like, what was it like? And when I thought about it, I said, what? Well, I think it was the most fun, exciting, adventurous day of my life. And of course, people thought that I was crazy. They looked at me like I had 2 heads. And that was kind of the moment, like the aha moment where, I realized that I had an experience that was less common and that I wanted to dedicate my life to helping other people have that experience. So
amazing. Isn't that so true though? Sometimes we only see ourselves in reflection of how people see us. It's such a fascinating experience.
Yeah, which is why we have to tell our stories. It's
it's so important. Well, so you went to George Washington University there in DC, right?
So the university I was at the time I became pregnant was Howard University. I was actually studying to be a journalist. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay. Tell us more.
yeah, that's a bit of a story because when people ask me when did I decide to be a midwife, actually, it really was around the age of 11 that I became obsessed with pregnant bodies and newborns. But I always had an interest in like biology. I did a lot of extracurricular programs from like the age of like 7, as my mother was in healthcare, so my first job was in a hospital. I worked as a peer health education counselor in my freshman and sophomore year of high school. I was an emergency medical technician out of high school before I actually went to college. So I did have a long history of being in healthcare and having an interest in women's healthcare. But when I was 11, I didn't know about midwifery. I thought, I would have to be an OBGYN. And I even entered college on the track to become, a physician. I was pre-med when I started college, but something happened when I transferred from a state university in New York to Washington, D.C., that my mind just totally spun around. And somehow I ended up majoring in media with a specialization in journalism. But even within that, like all of the articles that I did was still around like health and wellness. So it's been interesting. And I do see myself, I've been a practicing nurse now since 2010 and a midwife since 2017. And I do see myself in the near future merging, my love for just people getting information that's empowering with midwifery. So it'll all make sense soon.
Yeah. I love that. Was it Frontier that you did for nurse midwifery?
Yeah, so I have a journalism degree from Howard University, and I have a nursing degree from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I did the master's in nursing with specialty in midwifery at Frontier Nursing University in Kentucky.
Yeah, it's a great program. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are drawn to Frontier because of the flexibility that it offers. You can do the part-time, full-time. You can stay where you are and do most, your didactic online. And then also it's financially attractive. It's, and furthermore, they have a strong focus on birth center, care, which was, the reason I got into this work was I was very focused exclusively on birthing centers, but I have since, changed in that way.
So what's your focus now? What does it include now?
Well, it's funny when I first started working professionally in women and infant services, a mentor by the name of Ebony took me under her wing a bit and helped me to get my first, nursing position. And I recall her, this is back in 2013, saying, all right, do you want to go to labor and delivery or do you want to go to postpartum newborn? And at that time, I still lacked a lot of self-control as far as, that Sagittarian, straightforwardness, transparency in my tongue. And I thought that I would be so triggered by the things that I would be seeing in a labor and delivery unit that I said, no, just put me, postpartum newborn after the drama and the damage is already done. And then I'll just, I'll be with women after it. And so I actually did that for 4 or 5 years while I was putting myself through midwifery school. So it's, I was clear that I needed to grow a lot and I needed to become more tolerant. I mean, back in the day, I was very like, no epidural and, there's never a reason. There's never a reason. But I was also basing, my understanding of birth on my own experience, which was, I was 22 years old and very normal labor, normal postpartum, easy breastfeeding, everything. I was just lucky. Everything flowed. But as I became more exposed to just the reality that not every pregnancy or birth or postpartum period is the same. And people have different struggles. And part of what we do is meeting people where they are. And sometimes people do need epidurals and high risk care and hospital care. And it's no less of being a midwife. I currently work in a hospital, and I don't feel any less of a midwife now than I did when I was doing out of hospital.
That's a beautiful full circle. And I wonder if you can verbalize, was it just the exposure? Was it just seeing those folks and being really with them in the hospital birthing environment? Or like, what helped you find this new truth?
Well, one of the things that I definitely recommend all new midwives do before stepping foot in a hospital is working in the community with community midwives. And I mean, in a way, that's how I started, because my trajectory, so I had birth in the community. And then I saw birth in the hospital as a nursing student. And I worked in the hospital as a postpartum newborn nurse. And then my clinical rotation in midwifery school was in a very well-respected hospital midwifery service, where 47 out of 50 of my births were all unmedicated, normal vaginal deliveries in a hospital. No epidural, clients with the hospital, 8 centimeters, primips. They all had doulas, and they would give birth, and women over the age of 35, 38 having their first baby. And it was a very tight program of education, nutrition, childbirth education, developing rapport with these women, awesome phone treatment. So I saw midwifery being done really well in the hospital setting as a midwifery student. And then my first job as a professional midwife was with a birth center home birth practice in Alexandria, Virginia. Shout out to Birth Care and Women's Health. Started by Alice Bales and Marsha Jackson, recently sold to Dr. Midwife L. Schnetzel. So, they've been kicking since 1987 in that building since 1992, given like the most open-hearted, phenomenal community birth care that you could ever imagine. And, those are my teachers, those folks taught me how to care about people with my whole self, my whole heart, my whole body, my whole mind. And I can't
care for that whole person. Like, it's that mirror, right? Yeah.
It's that mirror, right? So if you're not absolutely stretched, I always say that, like, I don't know if you're doing that right. And I'm not saying beat yourself down. I'm not saying burn yourself out, but I'm saying show up 1000%. And in this world and in this society, I got to say, I think that's something that you have to be taught. And I think it's something that has to be modeled for you in order for you to really get it, So I'm grateful that I was able to get that as my foundation, working with that group for 2 years before going into the setting that I'm in now, which just challenges every single day my ability to give that open-hearted midwifery care.
So beautiful. Yeah, I just want to echo that again. Before you step foot in a hospital, you should understand physiologic birth in a community setting. That was your quote. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, I wrote my master's thesis on creating an interprofessional postgraduate clinical residency program for the community-based space, because I feel like even if you always work in a hospital, we should have this exposure. It shouldn't be so isolated. It shouldn't be for the few. It should be the baseline. How are we going to do that? How are we going to get more people in community-based birth?
Well,
because it's not a spectator sport either, right? So it's
not.
How do you, how are we going to do this?
One thing I always say when I'm in the hospital and somebody's kind of like questioning me about or pushing back on me as the provider on something that I want to do with or for a client to help their labor progress. And it's a moment where it's like an ego thing where it's like, well, we don't do it. Like, why are we doing it like that? My thing is always, okay, so we've been doing it like that. You've been doing it like that. And what's the maternal mortality rate right now? Right? Like, aren't we actually doing worse? Like, so once you recognize that whatever you've been doing, as we have all collectively realized at this point, has not working, then if you want things to change, you have to be willing to change. So it's really humility that's needed, the humbleness that's needed. You know, I did I'm actually here in Maine. I'm in Booth Bay.
Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's lovely. At Nell Tharp's house. We just finished a super camp. Really amazing experience.
Hello to Nell.
Yeah. And we were so blessed to have a community midwife. Like, I jump up and down like when a community midwife is amongst us, you know. And this is even like, you know, she's not a CPM. She's not a licensed midwife, you know. For whatever reason, she decided that she didn't need to sit that exam. You know what I mean? There's politics with this and that. I can't say that I understand all of it as a certified nurse midwife, but I'm learning the more I get to spend time with community midwives. But the bottom line is she's with people and she's doing things and she's talking about things and she's having an experience that nurse midwives, generally, you don't hear them talking about these things and doing these things and having these experiences. So there's a whole knowledge base there that, you know, we have access to, that we have to just humble ourselves. We have to humble ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to read something that you wrote, which is what spurred the idea that we would have this. Is that okay with you if I read your words?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you preface this post by saying reflections from a home birth midwife turned hospital midwife. And one section you wrote was, every system should have at-home cervical ripening policies that utilize evidence-based homeopathy, herbal, bodywork techniques, and they should have low-dose castor oil, evening primrose, red raspberry leaf, acupuncture, acupressure, myofascial release, and/or anything to do with spitting babies. This is where the hospital system needs to catch up. And I loved this quote so much because we need the whistleblowers like you. We need the change makers like you who are like, look, I know both sides. Let me tell you what I've learned. Because you didn't say in this post, because it's not apropos, but I'm sure you could also say, take the suturing workshop, learn more about the Pitocin usage, like home birth midwives, be prepared, but hospital catch up with this. And I love that bridge building. I love that uniting of these two really separate worlds you were able to see and do. And I can't wait to see what happens over the course of your career, being able to balance these two worlds. It's really extraordinary. There are so few of you. I love that you're speaking up. Do you get any pushback?
No, not yet. Not to my face.
Good. Good.
And I think it's because I kind of do like, you know, check both sides. And, you know, I'm still learning and growing. I'm very much in the beginning of my career. So, you know, if there's something that I say that doesn't tell the whole story, like I'm open, you know, to hearing it. But one of the things that I noticed when I got to the hospital is how little people bleed. Right? I mean, yes,
management has a place, right?
Right. What was that you said? Did you say active?
Active management has a place.
Right.
Yeah.
Very accustomed. Well, again, maybe our bodies are meant to handle a certain amount of blood loss that is actually healthy. But, you know, I was kind of accustomed to seeing, you know, heavy blood losses out of hospital. And then, you know, our babies. You know, very rarely does it happen that you have a baby that really needs support. But in the 2 years that I've been doing this, I have encountered it at least 2 to 3 times. You know, a baby that needed support, you know, the support of a neonatologist and it's not that we're not trained, but EMS, when they come, do they always bring the right equipment?
Never.
Do they know what to do to support a neonate, you know?
No, midwives got to be able to do it all, man. It's crazy.
And it's a lot. It's hot, and we shouldn't have to work that hard in a hospital setting. So, yeah, I don't think I'm just saying I'm not on any particular side except the side of, you know, women and families. And I just want us all to come together and do better, figure out how to just make it one system that has different facets to it. Because, I mean, duh. Why wouldn't?
That's the tweetable right there, or whatever it is for X now. But duh. There's enough evidence, anecdotal and academic. There's enough. Why not now? Why not come together and drop the ego or whatever it is that has us at odds and really work for the people? That it has to happen, right? We can't lose any more people to this disaster. We can't. And midwifery has to be the solution. We see it everywhere. And yet midwives continue to be barred from being at the center.
Right.
How are we going to change this?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I can speak super confidently. I mean, other than by kind of stating the obvious, right? Like there's financial interests, right?
Yeah, there's definitely financial interests. Yeah.
There is a problem with how we view or how education, is organized, cultural stuff about what we value, what we spend our money on, what we spend our time researching, and just some wicked patriarchal powers that don't want to see women, take their rightful place in this world. I mean, some of it absolutely comes down to just the energy of patriarchy.
Seriously.
Right? So, I mean, it's big work. When you start to wrap your brain around all of that, it can make you want to take a nap, because it's big work, but it really does, include all of that and more.
Yeah, the patriarchy and the systemic racism is a huge part of this crisis. I read a statistic yesterday that in the United States, every year, 30,000 women experience severe or moderately severe morbidity outcomes from childbirth.
Yeah.
And that statistic doesn't even seem to be talked about. The mortality is thankfully finally in the mainstream. We're seeing it in Ms. Magazine and in, Publica and, Wall Street Times and stuff. We're finally seeing these disproportionate mortality statistics being presented. But we're not seeing, at least I hadn't seen, and I'm on the lookout for the morbidity crisis where they're having life-altering realities. They're still alive, but they have crisis happening for them. And that feels like a really important statistic to name when we're talking about why midwifery care needs to be the dominant care as opposed to instrumental and surgical obstetrics. Working in the hospital, do you see any of these cases of severe or moderately severe morbidities after birth?
Oh, absolutely. If you know me, I'm not always the most dramatic communicator. But yeah, I have definitely been bowled over with the amount of morbidity and mortality, and not so much as maternal deaths. That's very uncommon, although I have seen it, and not necessarily just from birth, but from chronic diseases like asthma attack, epilepsy, that kind. But a lot of fetal demise in the second and third trimester, and then morbidity out the wazoo. Very common for people in the population in which I work to be coming to the healthcare setting in their late 20s and 30s with chronic hypertension.
Wow.
And to be having gestational diabetes. Very uncommon to see people at sort of normal BMIs. And to see people starting, people who have healthcare. How about this? People who have healthcare benefits to not be getting prenatal care until their late second trimester, early third trimester. Very common to see, C-sections, and he associated, blood losses, high blood losses, a lot of trauma, tons of trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma is through the wire. And, the system that I'm in is working so hard just to provide the intrapartum care that, nobody, unfortunately, to my knowledge, is really thinking about identifying these clients who have these longer length of stays, high intervention birth experiences. Nobody's really following up with them, like really, 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 not just Edinburgh postnatal depression screen or, how are it's going, but like really giving them the space and the time and the sense of safety that they need to be able to really process what happened in these births. So to answer the question, and it interestingly, it makes me look back at like my work as a birth center home birth midwife and say, man, I mean, I say it jokingly, but our clients were spoiled. They were spoiled rotten. Like we should actually call it, I used to say concierge midwife, luxury. I mean, compared to what I see with the general population, I mean, it's bare bones. It's a bare bones. It looks to me as someone coming from community birth, like a very bare bones system.
Yeah.
Oh, and things are bound to happen with you. You got people who, I'm primarily a hospitalist. So the majority of the clients that I'm with, I never even met them a day in my life.
Yeah.
And we're stretched. There's nursing shortages out the wazoo. So many of the experienced nurses got totally burnt out in COVID and retired. So pretty much everywhere you have a slew of new nurses dealing with moderate and high risk clientele. And I mean, just use your imagination. It is intense.
This episode is brought to you by Laudor Bookkeeping, a virtual bookkeeping firm supporting midwives and doulas. We understand that what you love to do is serve mamas. And sometimes nothing takes you out of your zone of genius like thinking about the money. But fortunately, there is a way to make confident money moves, pay yourself a consistent salary, proactively save for taxes, and plan for growth. This all starts with clean, tidy books. That's where we come in. To learn more about working with us, click the link in the show notes.
Well,
to
kind of segue, the secondary trauma from being in that overworked, under-supported, kind of critical environment can be really intense. Do you have strategies? Do you have systems that help you stay supported and grounded and whole in this process?
Yeah. It's I'm sure you said that also because you could sense, you could sense me going back to that place. I've been on vacation-ish now for about a week. I was actually in Oregon before I came here. I was at a very lovely women's gathering in Cave Junction, Oregon, where
another lovely place in the world. Yes.
We camped out, we sat around the fire, we sang songs, we skinny dipped in the river. We loved up on one another for 4 days straight. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I had a heart-to-heart, a session actually with a somatic mental health provider, and you know how it is when somebody makes space for you to have like a vulnerable moment and you like feel it and it's authentic. And then every tear that you've been building up, for the last like 3 months just comes forward, and, I'm just sobbing. And one of the things that I was sobbing about was the fact that I don't feel like I can grow my hair. And, there's nothing wrong with having short hair. This is not about that. It's about my desire to have long hair, but because of the work that I do, the energy work that I do, basically leaving me absolutely depleted and having no time to like tend to my hair, So I've just,
It's such a powerful example because it's so metaphorical too, right? If you don't have time to tend to yourself, what must you be doing with your days? Whoa, that's heavy.
And, one thing that I didn't realize about the hospital system until I was in it was that I'm not just midwife to the clients like I felt like when I was out of hospital. Because out of hospital, there's less births. There's a little bit more time to care for yourself, depending on your practice, of course, right? The one that I was in had about 3 full-time midwives, 1 part-time, and 1 kind of per diem that jumped in and out. And we did about 14, 15 births a month. So that was a nice life. So, most of us, took pretty good care of ourselves. But in the hospital, I'm finding that I'm having to not only be midwife to my clients and their families, but sometimes the staff. Anesthesia is having a meltdown about something today. Oh, we all matter in this thing, right? So I've had to really, when I'm not working, I'm either doing things to calm my nervous system, reconnecting to nature. It's like my part-time job, staying balanced and staying well so I can basically live to see another day,
Well, I support that important work. I hope that the people in your life also support how important those self-care rituals are. I hope anyway. So important.
Yeah, it's a lot for folks to really wrap their brain around. Like I said, I'm still at the beginning of my career. I'm not married, so I'm single. I have a daughter who's in college who I think definitely gets it. She probably gets it more than anyone because she's, I have pictures of her on every campus that I've pretty much been on, starting from Howard University when she was 1 year. She's seen the journey and she appreciates the work. And my greater community, I think, one of the things that you get often is, oh my God, you're a midwife. How amazing. That must be the best job. And of course it is, right? And I'm all tired and it's hard to have a social life and, it's hard to detach at times. And there's this whole other piece that you almost kind of got to live to really understand.
Yeah, on-call life is a special reality that not everyone gets.
Right.
And on-call life without relief is another kind of level. And that's what a lot of community-based midwives live. There is no one else to and call. There's no end of the shift, that's all another thing.
Yeah. I don't know how they do it at all. It's one of
you did it time, but you had a group practice.
Group practice, a well-organized, well-oiled machine pretty much. And so
Brooklyn Birth Center has been around for a long, long time now. So great. Well, so what's next for you? I've heard you say a couple of times that you're kind of knowing your career. You're in this hospital, this position. Where do you see yourself? Because your voice is so important, this dual perspective. Being a Black midwife in America is so important. There's so much that you could do, so many places that you could go, so many ways you could impact. What's next for you? What are you hoping for? What are you planning for?
One of the things that I'm doing with Nell Tharp is, she's hoping to retire from this work that she's been doing in, teaching midwives how to improve their suturing skills and hoping that she can pass that information to folks, but especially to Black midwives, right?
Yeah.
So that, we can teach other Black midwives and teach all midwives how to do this work. So that's a project that I'm working very closely with her on. I'm also getting involved with a rewrite of a book that she's been publishing since I want to say the early 2000s called Clinical Guidelines for Midwifery Practice on a particular thing to do with reproductive health justice. And, as far as work, I have been, open to other positions. I recently received an offer as a clinical faculty instructor with a medical school in the area. So in that position, I'll be teaching first year residents how to do birth midwife way. So I am excited, anxious, and just looking forward to all of the growth that that's going to bring. And all of the lives, that I'll be able to touch through that instruction.
That's big. Damn, that's exciting. Woo!
Yeah. And then, long term, I've always wanted to own and operate a birth center. When I started working as a birth center, I got a little nervous. It's like, wait a minute, this is a big one. I think now where I am with that is, I think I really want to be most instrumental in the infrastructure, of maternal care, like building an infrastructure where birth centers can be sustainable.
Yes.
Because, all of even the place that I gave birth at all those years ago has had a lot of, issues with sustainability and women's health, because the women who have started that place and who worked at that place are some God-fearing women. They are some women who know how to take life as it comes and take it one day at a time.
Yes.
And glory to God that place has still been running for 37 years. But as you know, there's so many birth centers that, come and go.
In fact, the ABC statistic, I think, is that every single week in the United States, a new birth center opens and every single week a new birth center closes.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I mean, starting one was like the big thing, but it's like, no, how do we create something like a model for something that can actually last?
Yeah, this is the question.
Right. And then the big piece is also like the culture. I can't tell you how many times I walk into a birth room and introduce myself and ask the client, so what is your plan for your birth? What is your vision for your birth? Like, what kind of experience do you hope to have? And I have to unpack it that way because often people they're like, birth plan? Like, I mean, we think like everybody we know, like in our work, well, of course, we all know what birth plans are. Our clientele, out of hospital clientele, they know. But in the general population, people still don't know.
They don't know that they have any authority over that.
It blew my mind. Yeah. Ever worked, in a population that wasn't like acutely aware, and there's a lot of people out there. So, part of my mission is to use my voice, use my journalism, use my writing, and just show up in spaces with people who need to know that they can have a vision. Okay to have a vision. It's advised vision, Think about this. Let's meditate on this. You to show up, I need you to show up for this birth. I need you in your mouth. I say that a lot. Like, I need to hear from you, everybody who's in this room. I need to hear from everybody. Like, what are we doing today? How can I serve you? How can I serve this vision? You know what I'm saying? Because this is, right? That's a long distance from nobody needs an epidural, which is where I start, right? To how of your vision. I have to know who you are and where you are before we dive into this. And so I think, that's probably my biggest sort of career is to help shift the culture, help progress in the general population around birth.
Wow. Well, that is it's a really epic goal. And I can see how these different steps you've named are really in support of that mission. But sometimes tangentially, like sometimes through the third person, you'll have this impact. But still, you're on mission, friend. You're on point. It's so awesome. I love it when I hear a personal mission. It's so inspiring. It's so inspiring. Our mission at Midwifery Wisdom for a decade now has been to facilitate and help move midwifery into the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like that is a similar goal.
Yeah.
It's really epic.
I know this is like an interview, but like I have so many questions for you, like about, what you're doing and how you envision, your life's work going. And I mean, you're doing this amazing conference that I hear people are having such a transformative experience meeting. You're bringing people together, right? You're bringing some good people together, right? Which is just, I think one of the most important things that can be done, for midwives who are sometimes in the silos and needing that fortification and that validation and that fellowship. Like it's everything, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm a connector. That's definitely my life's mission.
Yeah,
I'm a connector. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We hope to see you at conference some year. Will you come?
Yeah. Have I spoken at any conferences yet?
No. Will you come speak at ours? That's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Don't want to put you on the spot or anything.
I mean, but yes, I would love to.
If you're busy this year, we'll take you any year that you're free. But this year we're in New Orleans in November.
Okay.
It's gonna be fun.
Okay.
I'll send you details.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk offline. Yeah, it's a beautiful. I also love when I meet people who are on mission,
Yeah.
There's so much to do. And now is such a right time. Aren't you loving that?
Yes. It feels tragic what so many have had to go through, but it also feels like finally, the catalyst has happened. The mainstream media is reporting on the safety of midwifery and the doctor shortages and the healthcare atrocities and the inequities. And like, finally, it's like it's being heard. And so I have a lot of hope for what's going to happen. I still have a lot of fear, though. And I have to say, as someone who understands community-based birth, I'd love your opinion on this. I have a real fear that community-based birth it is an endangered species and might be in real peril because of the institutionalization, the academicization of midwifery, the real hostility towards the community-based space, and the delegitimization of the apprenticeship process. I'm worried. I'm worried we might make it through the next decade. And if we didn't, I'm worried about what would be lost to humanity.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I hear you, because I've been hearing little things here or there that sort of painting that picture, CPMs being pushed out, in certain states, and this whole DMP thing, and midwives having to have doctorates, and certain powers that be, okay, yes, midwifery, but only nurse midwifery, you know what I mean? Like that kind of conversation. Yeah, I mean, to tell you the absolute truth, I just don't know what to do about it. I
don't either. And at the same time, I absolutely love that you have these like lines of degrees. I absolutely love that you are teaching physicians. I absolutely love that you're bringing informed decision-making to the hospital space. Like, there's something really beautiful about all of those advances. And when I say those, I sometimes feel like nurse midwives might cringe because it feels like a shot across the bow, but actually it's the opposite. I'm just saying, like, how are we going to solve this problem where these advances and introduction of lots of new technologies that are coming online are profound and are helping.
Right.
But if we leave behind these ancient truths, I think we lose the balance, and I think community-based midwives are some of the only ones still holding that balance. I mean, you might be one of the most important ones, and people like you who've worked in both scenes, like Angie Love comes to mind, like Angela Love out of Florida. She's a nurse midwife who does home births, and like that's such a balance. And I'm afraid we might, I know it's in peril, but it's conversations like this, and it's connections, and it's conferences, and it's sharing information that helps us not forget about the herbal protocols and the tincture of time and the space that midwives provide. Like, that is so important.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, I didn't mention it originally when you asked the question about what's next, but the ultimate goal for me is really to form independent institutions, because, and I was just saying this last night in conversation with a nurse midwife that was at the camp who had never worked out of hospital. I'm like, okay, we have to always remember the history. You cannot forget the history, that the midwife has always been an autonomous woman, right? Who was the gatekeeper, who would at times allow, a doctor type person to come into the birth space, someone who was trusted in order to utilize, his or her tools, right? With a difficult birth, or, if there needed to be a surgical birth or something like that. But we were the gatekeepers, as it should always be. It should always be.
Shift. Yes.
That's the shift. So when, the grand midwives were, slammed and, lied on, and propaganda was used to, get people into the hospital and away from community, it was the physician who said, okay, let's create the nurse midwife, right? So that is the genealogy of nurse midwives. So I understand, I became a nurse midwife because I wanted to be able to move through all three settings, right? And most of us, a lot of times, do that. But there definitely is a contingency of nurse midwives that don't know their genealogy. They don't know their history. They don't know from whence they came. They think that, oh, well, I've always been a nurse. I was a labor and delivery nurse. Well, it would just make sense. I would just stay in a hospital. They have not even ever contemplated being in the community. They don't know what it's like to be wild and free community midwives. They don't know like how much, which is why I said everyone should start there, because that's how you really learn how to really care about people in a way that they really feel it, and when you're used to working like that, you don't worry about litigation. Honestly, I don't worry about litigation. I was trained I'm not going to use my brain cells to worry about somebody suing me. If I know that I'm 100% present, right? And I'm giving everything I have, and I'm connected, and I'm really truly with women, the chances are ain't nobody going to sue me. That's something that community midwives know. And so we don't hold back as much. We don't, we don't have all these boundaries. I'm not saying boundaries aren't important, but the number of boundaries and the level to which you have boundaries.
Or brick walls instead of boundaries. Right. Like barriers instead of boundaries. Like, we don't have those paywalls, like, is a way to think about it. But you can't even reach your physician if you want to, right? You can't call them. And that's a barrier to care versus a boundary being like, this is an appropriate client for me. Like, I think those are different. But you're absolutely right. Like in the community-based setting, you don't think about that because you're too busy thinking about the client in front of you.
Right. Exactly. Right. So like, let us never really get comfortable in these institutional spaces, because, to the writing that you read of mine, that is not the foundation. That's not the ideal. That's not what any of this was intended to look like. One of the things that I always talk about is my two loves are midwifery and Africa. I started going back to Africa in 2015, and I've had maybe about 6 trips since then. And when I'm talking to people about why they should want to be there, especially people of African descent, one of the things that the pictures that I always paint is, think about your ancestors. Think about your ancestors that were removed, right? And even think about the ones that stayed, that were not removed, right? Think about the ones that made the journey through the Middle Passage, that survived it. Think about the ones that first stepped foot in this land and endured, brutality through slavery. Think about the ones that survived it. Think about the ones that were able to thrive and multiply. Think about the ones that made sure that you could be here today doing what you do, getting a passport, and using your passport to go to everywhere in Europe and everywhere through the Caribbean, and never once going back to the place that your people were removed from. Like, this is not our ideal. The people who see themselves as descendants of slaves, this was not what was intended for us, right? So you can choose to stay here if you want to, but you should absolutely be taking every advantage that you have, to go back. And I kind of see midwifery that way. Okay, yeah, we know the majority of women right now are giving birth in hospitals, and in order for us to be with women, you know what I mean? Some of us have to be there, but never get comfortable thinking that's your home. Never get comfortable thinking that's where you belong and that's where the majority of women belong. It happens to be what's going on right now, but we should always be making steps to move back to the way things were, in the sense of community, family, connection, togetherness, relationship, like real relationship, that is the foundation. Those are the fundamentals. And that's where, you know what I mean? We have to work our way. We have to work out if we want to survive.
Nothing else needs to be said. There you go. Ebony, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is just profound symmetry and imagery. Wow. Never get comfortable in the institution because it's not where you live.
It's not where you live. It's not where you live. It's not where you live. The moment in time.
Thank you so much for being on this call.
Thank
How
you.
can people follow you if they want to connect personally?
So I am on socials, not as often as sometimes I chide myself that I should be, but I'm on Instagram. My first name, Ebony _M _Simpson _CNM.
Okay, we'll put that link down below so it'll be easy.
Okay. Same name on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can email me, ebonymsimpson@gmail.com.
Thank you.
And, you can find me around DC Metro. I live in the lovely little hippie village of Tacoma Park. So if you see me at any of the cafes or sitting on the grass in the park, feel free to come over and say hello. That would be lovely.
Thank you, friend. I hope I get to see you in person. Really appreciate it.
I would look forward to that. And thank you so much for this work that you're doing. I mean, it's super revolutionary to be getting people together. So please, please, please continue. Stay encouraged. Let me know if there's any way that I can assist in anything that you do. I will quickly, emphatically say yes to anything that you ask.
I will
reach out.
In the future. Thank you.
You're welcome.